Hi, this is Jack Stanley, and I wanted to talk about Warren G. Harding, who is quite often just a footnote in our history. And we hear about the Teapot Dome scandal and other people like Dougherty, who is his attorney general, who is of dubious quality. However, I want to say a few things about Warren G. Harding. I don't think he was anywhere near the bad president that he's been made out to be. Well, usually people who talk about Harding usually read what someone else wrote before. Therefore, they don't put any intellectual thought of their own into it. I find Warren G. Harding an incredible individual. He was a newspaper owner and editor. He had a remarkable vocabulary. He was quite charismatic. He played a musical instrument. And he was a wonderful speaker who wrote most of his own speeches, by the way. And his speeches are not bad. Even though we listened to some of the people who said it sounds like wet sponges, his speech. I seriously disagree. How many of the people who talk about Warren G. Harding have listened to his speeches? He made recordings of them. They're remarkable. You know, it's an interesting thing just to mention. I was reading the autobiography of one of the recording engineers for the Victor Talking Machine Company, who started his career in 1901. And he talked about recording some of the presidents. And he went to record Theodore Roosevelt in 1912. And he said, would you like to do something special, mark something down here for posterity? And Theodore Roosevelt's answer was, I don't give a damn about posterity. That's typical for Theodore Roosevelt. Theodore Roosevelt didn't give a damn about most people. Theodore Roosevelt was very concerned with Theodore Roosevelt. But the thing is that Warren G. Harding, when he made his recordings, not only did he make the recordings, he had printed copies made of his speech for all of the recording engineers, which he inscribed to each individual. A very different person, a far better person than Theodore Roosevelt. The other thing about Warren G. Harding is he was the first president of the 20th century to push for an arms limitation treaty, which was brokered by his Secretary of State, Charles Evans Hughes. Andrew Mellon was his Secretary of the Treasury. Agriculture was Herbert Hoover. He had a lot of really good people around him. He created the Veterans Bureau. Also pushed for a lot of things to help the common man. He pushed people into spending some money. He lowered taxes. The great surge of the Roaring Twenties is not due to Calvin Coolidge. It's due to the Warren Harding administration. And I'm always very taken with a comment that he made once, in which he said, it is far better for people to think not what the government can do for you, but what you can do for the government. Sounds familiar a little bit? Well, yes, it was borrowed a little bit in 1961 for John F. Kennedy's inauguration. Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. The same message. I find a great deal of similarity between Warren G. Harding and John F. Kennedy. Warren G. Harding didn't have any defenders. But Warren G. Harding was not a bad president. He wasn't a great one. But after the last few years, and look at the people we have had, he is stellar compared to the last presidents we've had in the last 30 some odd years. Another thing to mention about Warren G. Harding is he did an awful lot for the people. He was very happy to meet with people. He spent a lot of time meeting with veterans. He did a lot of things to help the economy. He tried to take us away from the problems of World War I. He tried to push for a lot of normalcy, as they called it. And the other thing is, yeah, he wasn't perfect. He had lots of problems, but I'll tell you something. I would be very happy to have a Warren G. Harding in office today. Because I'll tell you something, he wasn't as bad as we have made him out to be. I have often said I find great similarities between Warren Harding and John F. Kennedy. The only problem is that Harding had no defenders. When Harding died in 1923, he was the perfect scapegoat. And he was made the perfect scapegoat. His wife died the following year. Before long, all of the troubles that had taken place were blamed on Warren G. Harding, who was dead. He couldn't defend himself. Then, of course, you had Nan Britton, who wrote a book called The President's Daughter, said that he fathered her child. Well, she didn't have any letters. She didn't have anything. But she took away the credibility of the president. Also, another thing that's very, very important is that Gaston Means, in 1931, wrote a book called The Strange Death of President Harding, which was a complete, monstrous piece of fiction. Gaston Means couldn't tell the truth if his life depended on it. Everything in that book is bogus. In fact, the most interesting thing about Gaston Means is he had never met President Harding or his wife. Yet he acted like he was an intimate. And so the reputation of Warren G. Harding has been sullied by all of these individuals after his death. I am not saying he's not without blame, because he is. Every president we have ever had in history has been somewhat corrupt. Only natural. It's part of the human animal. George Washington sold the sandstone to make the White House and Capitol. Used the power of the executive office to capture his escaped slaves. I mean, every president has had a little share of problems. The whole thing is that most presidents have had protectors. Can you imagine John F. Kennedy without protectors? He was very much like Warren G. Harding. We knock Warren G. Harding because he was a womanizer. Same thing as John F. Kennedy, big deal. Bill Clinton, same thing. The other thing is we knock him because he played cards in the White House and he drank in the White House during Prohibition. Big deal. I don't think that's a big problem. I don't care what my president drinks. I don't care what my president smokes. I want my president to do a decent job. And I have to say, Warren G. Harding did. And if Warren G. Harding is the example of a bad president, I surely hope we have another Warren G. Harding in the near future. This country could use one.